members of Congress, distinguished guests, ministers, family, and friends. She called me her brother from another mother. I called her my older sister. We knew each other for 55 years. My father, who was active in the Dallas County Democratic Party, was her accountant. He prepared her tax returns. When I was 15 years old, my parents invited her over for a Friday night Shabbat dinner, and we became friends. In 1973, she went to the legislature in Texas as a state representative. I went as a legislative staffer for then newly elected state representative Jim Maddox while I was in college. I got a semester's college credit for being his legislative aide. I graduated early from college so that in 1975 I could come back to the legislature and be Jim Maddox's chief of staff and the original founding director, executive director of the Texas House Study Group, a group of 65 state representatives who we did bill analysis, legislative drafting for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party in 1975. That organization still exists. Bernice Johnson was on my executive committee. She contributed part of her office salaries, staff salaries, as did other members, for me to have a staff, which included my older brother who just graduated from law school. It was then that I learned that she was brilliant and that she knew an incredible amount about legislative strategy. And we continued discussing legislative strategy for the rest of her life. I went from the legislature to law school, and in 1978, shortly after I graduated law school, she asked me to be her personal attorney, and I remained her personal attorney. We had many, many, many occasions that we shared together. She was at all of my significant family events. She spoke when my 35-year-old daughter was first a baby, at her baby naming. She spoke at the funeral of my 99-year-old mother about 3 years ago. And it was then that I found out that she talked a lot more to my mother than I knew about. And she told me that what she discussed with my mother was none of my business. I have many stories about Eddie. Obviously, not enough time to tell them all, but I'll tell you just a few. As you've heard, she was a fashionista. Her favorite place to shop was the Neiman Marcus Last Call while she was in Austin, and the St. John's Outlet when she went to D.C. So one time in the 90s, we were in D.C. for a trial lawyer meeting, and she insisted on driving my wife and my wife's friend of an English lawyer, girlfriend that was wife of an English lawyer, to the outlets in Maryland. Should have been a 1-hour drive. For Bernice, it was about a 2.5-hour drive. And it took my wife about an hour to get up the nerve to ask her to turn on the air conditioning in the car. I think everyone appreciated when Bernice wasn't driving herself anymore. She loved costume jewelry. So one time, she had a women's event at our house where she had a costume jewelry designer for Neiman Marcus come for an event with Nancy Pelosi. She often used our house for her events and her fundraising events because, as all of you members of Congress know, she was a terrible political fundraiser because she didn't want to ask anybody for money. So it fell upon me to be her primary political fundraiser in the course of her career in the Senate and in Congress. Something that very, very few people knew, the year of 1992, her last year in the Senate, when she was running for Congress, she was employed by my law firm as a nurse paralegal. She took great interest in my cases and in my career. I was there when she was sworn in, first time as a state senator, first time as a U.S. Congresswoman, when in 1982, I was the president of our National Trial Lawyers Organization, the American Association of Justice, and I was sworn in Philadelphia. Eddie Bernice Johnson was there to speak at my swearing in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much.
I have just a few more minutes, and the family told me that I could take just a few more minutes. So please allow me.
Sir, the Congress has to catch a plane and get back, so we're trying to give our pastor enough time to share his message.
I will do that, but I have a message that's important for me to deliver. I never expected Eddie Bernice Johnson to be one of my medical malpractice cases. And it is important for the world to know that Eddie Bernice Johnson opposed the law that devalued human life. No human being that dies from medical negligence in the state of Texas should have to suffer further with a $250,000 cap on that life. And today I say to Governor Abbott and our Republican legislature and our Republican leaders in the legislature, in the name and memory of Eddie Bernice Johnson, amend that law. Call it the Eddie Bernice Johnson Amendment for the Value of Human Life, and change that 20-year-old law so that the value of human life is more than $250,000 in Eddie Bernice Johnson's memory and the spirit of bipartisanship that she had all of her life. My last words to Eddie Bernice about 3 weeks ago were, "I love you." And her response to me was, "I love you too." We all here loved her. That's why we're here. And she loved all of us, and we will never stop fighting for her until the law is changed and the compensation is just. Thank you.
Let the church say amen. Giving honor to God,